Again, I'm going to remind you that these PowerPoints are available in the Miro board as hyperlinks. Okay, so we talked about the intro to permaculture. Let's get into some nitty gritty of what is some of the foundational stuff in this thing we're calling a design process. And one of the foundational things is 3 ethics. Okay, and these 3 ethics, the fact that a design system even has ethics that is a foundation of its core and its process, is literally world changing. When Bill Mollison traveled for 10 years around the world studying cultures from different ancestral peoples and histories, visiting indigenous tribes and cultures to learn how they integrated, the foundational part of what he learned from all of this knowledge was that all of these cultures were regenerative, not just sustainable, but regenerative. So their ecosystems and their communities was because they were based in ethics and morals. And so he created the entire permaculture design system on these foundation of these 3 ethics. Now, earth care, people care, and fair share, also known as return of surplus. I like to call that 3rd ethic also future care, because it's taking in considerations limits for our future together. All right, so now I'm going to start calling some people. Just moving y'all's faces around a little bit. I would like to hear what you know about earth care. Let's start with you, Carol.
Earth care, that would be being a good steward of the earth, of our resources, of our immediate community and environment, and beyond.
And Andy, what can you add to that? I'm going around the gallery.
Really thinking of the earth first, and her needs, and weaving that in, baking that into the culture of what you're doing.
And David, when we start to think about the earth first and our actions are being a steward, how does that create that ripple effect out? I did mute you, by the way, so if you want to unmute. Are you here with us, David? Oh, there you
are. Well, I would say to give back more than what we take. To the earth, and also to assist to a point on the health of the soil, the earth, because if we grow, like I say, if we grow healthy soil, whatever we grow on that soil will be healthy for us.
So what David is mentioning is that this earth care ethic isn't actually separate from the people care. So what Carol and Andy mentioned, Carol being stewards, the way that we're interacting and considering the earth, and then Andy saying, it's always on the forefront of the mind. It's one of our first considerations when we're thinking of things and designing systems. David just mentioned that this earth care thing, again, isn't just earth care. It also is interlaced with every other one, because when we are thinking of the earth first, we are also thinking of fair share. When we are thinking of the earth first, we're thinking of all the other humans that are also on this earth. Because when we are returning that surplus, when we are giving and receiving from the earth, we are also taking care of the other humans that are also in that same relationship. Okay, so with that being said, Nala, can you tell me what people care is?
I see people care as, part of very connected to earth care in the sense that we are nature, but how is everyone being impacted? Because if something I feel like if anything, whether it's any kind of change or structure is only benefiting those of privilege, then it's not really revolutionary to begin with. So how is it supporting community and everyone together?
And then I'm going to come right back around to you, Carol. Can you explain a little more of how people care is interlaced?
How people care is interlaced with earth care, or just in general people care?
Let's say with Earth Care.
So, well, I mean, David touched on, well, first off, without the earth and the resources, we are nothing.
Ding!
We have nothing to survive on.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge.
Yeah, and I don't think people really get that.
And that we're not separate from the earth, right? Like we had just talked about in the
No.
last unit. Yeah. And Andy, when we talk about this interrelation, like this weaving between the two, right? Of people care and earth care, why does that third ethic, that sneaky future care, fair share, why does it keep coming back in? Why isn't it just earth care, people care? Why is that third ethic there?
The first thing that comes to my mind is just cycles, like it's cycles of life. And that you said future care, it's like it's and I'm looking at this image, right? It's like this, it's a circle of life. It sounds super, I'm like all of a sudden singing the Lion King, but it's like seriously the cycle, right? Like the circle of life, bringing Elton. But it's a cycle. That's all I can see is this like a woven cycle. We were just talking about, not to, but just one sentence, we were just talking about green burials. And if you can go back into the earth when you're done, or be food for a tree when you're done, it's like, I think it was David that said, I lost my train of thought. That means I'm done.
Good catch. And David, my last question on this before we move into the next thing is, why is fair share, return of surplus, just this third ethics, right? Why is it so important, particularly in today's time?
Well,
And some would say that this ethic is actually the most important.
I do believe it's the most important one of the ethics, because I'm gonna put myself as an example in my small 1 acre farm. If I grow enough food to feed myself, to feed my family, and I have a surplus of that food, I can share that with my next door neighbor. I can share that with my neighbor across the street. And by doing that, they will be empowered of the freshness and the goodness on the harvest that they just received, and they
Thank
will.
goodness from you.
Yeah, but I don't, I don't see that part. But I see the part that they will just be curious about how did I grow that food, that quality of food. So that will empower their curiosity to learn about what I'm doing in permaculture.
Exactly. And that is also interlacing into those other ethics, like by sharing that surplus, by giving to his neighbors, he is taking care of the people. And in return, those people are having to exploit systems less because of his people care, which means it is then interleading into earth care. Now, Nala, my question for you is, when we talk about this third ethic of fair share, return of surplus, we commonly only think of returning the surplus, right? Or sharing the abundance from our gardens and such. But it is more than that. can you tell me also how this ethic relates to limits?
I mean, about resources and renewable versus non-renewable, and taking more than the earth is willing to give, in a sense. And I think about growing or producing, building in a way that won't, deplete the land, and so that it will be able to continue to further future generations, because we haven't like broken the limits of how much of earth can provide.
Exactly. And then on the flip side of that, also growth of economics or growth of a corporation or a business also limited by the limits of the people and not exploiting those people to just have endless growth for that corporation. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? Right? Like we think that there are no limits on the earth and that human beings have endless to give into the cog in the system, right? Which is why some people say that this third ethic, fair share, return to surplus, also known as future care, is one of the most important, because we have aspects of our culture today in the United States and echoes out into the broader world where we do have earth care, right? Like we have sustainability, there's regenerative, there's LEED, there's all different kinds of ways of integrating yourself specifically in that ethic. And we have people care, we have therapists, we have compassionate communication, we have nonviolence, we have whole temples dedicated to being still and quiet and loving oneself and loving one neighbor. But we don't commonly see this fair share ethic showing up. We don't commonly see it show up in our economics. We don't commonly see it when we're talking about when they take trees down out of national parks, the milling, the lumber operations that they're doing in the national parks these days. This isn't something that's a common language, even with sustainability, even with nonviolent communication. And so when we bring all three of these together, yes, the regenerative practices of the earth are also being considered when we're talking about caring and giving and for ourselves and for each other, but also in the limits of that and the boundaries. Now, for me, permaculture, when I first got into permaculture design, I was a people pleaser. I was a very generous person who would give the literal shirt off my back, regardless of the outcome to myself or my community. And it was actually through learning and implementing these three ethics that I saw that my own personal boundaries was actually limiting my ability in people care and earth care. And that by respecting my limits and my boundaries, I actually was able to keep those ethics true. I was able to hold my integrity, have an impeccable word, and I was able to continuously give to the earth. And so this is where we see that feedback loop again that we're going to keep talking about, where when we have a multitude of things to take a look at and integrate as a whole, not just segments. And we're going to see that repeated multiple times when we're talking about permaculture design. Can I see where we're at right now in the comprehension of these three ethics? Do we understand what these three ethics are, how they lace in together? I got 3 thumbs up. David, will you do a verbal?
Yes, I do understand the ethics, and I believe it's the most important thing when it comes to design.
Absolutely. All right, so I'm going to move to the next. So now let's start talking about how do we take these three ethics, right? We totally understand these three ethics in our mind. We understand this concept. We understand why they exist. We understand why they interrelate to each other, but then how do we begin to apply these? And so let's take a look just here in our classroom, okay? Just here in our classroom, what does it actually look like for us to take these three ethics and apply them? So care of earth, it would mean anatomy of food, water, and energy through sustainable methods. I may even challenge that statement and say, not sustainable methods, but regenerative. Now, small scale and long-term productive designs close the hunger gaps and periods of insufficiency and rejuvenate landscapes. Now, what does care of people look like when we're talking in the structure of just this classroom? Encouraging active cooperation, empowering people to act, acquisition of useful peaceful skills, develop and extend local knowledge networks and trust. Now here's that third ethic, fair share, future care. Reinforce local culture, give only relevant and accurate information, acknowledge and recognize prior suffering injustices, and apply environmentally and socially sound principles, and build on existing valuable knowledge and practices. Any questions about how we took those three ethics and applied it to the structure, the design of this course, and how we're going to continue to weave those three ethics through what we're talking about? Okay, so now let's continue with some generalities of permaculture, because we will get into some of the intense stuff, I promise you, quicker than you imagine. So permaculture is intensive rather than extensive. And what does it mean to be intensive rather than extensive? David.
I think when it says that it's intensive more than extensive, I believe it's the amount of initial work that it has to be put on the design, and then the design will actually work by itself.
Exactly. So what David is referring to is that thoughtful process, that intensive designed process that is going to create a system that over time is going to actually need less extensive labor. So by intensively having that design process, it's not going to be this long, drawn out, extensive process to make it work. We're sitting and thinking and observing so that we don't have to have that. Okay, the second thing is diversity in species, cultivars, yields, microclimates, habitats, and functions. This is a huge part of permaculture design. One of the major parts of permaculture is increasing the amount of diversity. And because we do live in this time where we're seeing a mass extinction across all sorts of ecosystems in the human society, let alone in nature, permaculture has really started to focus on this. How many microclimates, how many habitats, and how many functions can I stack in the smallest space possible? Integration of agriculture, animal husbandry, forestry, foraging, and landform engineering. Andy, how does that statement interconnect with the previous one, the diversity?
In the web of things, the diversity allows for that integration. They for sure go hand in hand, because with that diversity, you're welcoming all of those diverse aspects of the system to integrate and speak to each other.
And do you think that there could be an integration of agriculture with animal husbandry, with forestry, with foraging, with landform engineering without diversity?
No.
So when we have a monoculture cornfield, can we have an integration of all those things?
No.
No.
We don't. No, we don't have. We don't. Yeah. No.
And Carol, when we see it go from diversity to monoculture, right? What are we seeing happen?
A depletion in diversity, a depletion in everything that's connected to diversity. You see bee die off. You see, other species not being able to forage the way that they need to, and or whatever was clear cut to create that field has been pushed out as well.
Exactly. And then, so the next one after that is adjustable to marginal lands. Nala, what does it mean by marginal lands?
Maybe more like of my explanation of this is not gonna be great. Lands maybe of those underprivileged more so.
Yeah. And when you are referring to the underprivileged, what typically do we see the kind of land that they're on?
Feel like it can be near industrial sites or have been taken over by corporations.
It's the least valued land, right? We see underprivileged societies placed in the least valued land. For example, let's think of Flint, right? The majority of the population in Flint is people of color, okay? And they were placed in an infrastructure that did not receive funding to allow for clean, safe drinking water. Now, the government, it wasn't going to change those circumstances because it is marginal land and because it is marginal people. So when we talk about all of these things that we just talked about, why is it permaculture specifically bringing up over and over again that we need to adjust these design systems for marginal land? Why is that so important, David?
Sorry, what was the question again? Or no, it's right.
Why is it important for us to adjust permaculture design systems for marginal land?
Wow. I got lost on that one.
That's okay. You could totally pass. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna go back to Carol. I'm just gonna jump it here in our gallery.
Yeah, it's well, it's important because marginalized lands equaling marginalized people then don't have access to the resources that they should and could. So when we begin to integrate these practices in those areas, then that increases the equitability of, you know, future care, people care, and what was that last one? Fair share.
Nala, did you have something to add?
Nope, I did that on accident.
Okay. I want to add to what Carol just said as well, is that the majority of human beings on this planet are actually marginalized individuals. Okay. And so to have actually the most effect of actually making the earth a regenerative designed integration with the human species, we actually need to take marginalized people and marginalized lands and give them the resources so that they themselves and the land itself can build relationship and build the systems they need, because that's going to have the most impact on all of these issues that we're seeing. For example, what India, the entire country of India, just experienced massive heat waves this summer. And they are one of the most marginalized countries in this world. Now, when we are seeing such spikes in temperature, India is going to continue to see these spikes in temperature. Okay. And when you have 112 degrees that at night, with 120 to 125 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, you're going to see a massive death of people. And so it's actually predicted, if we continue on the path that we are with carbon emissions, that India is going to see millions of people die just from the increase in temperature alone. Okay. And the reason why that has an effect, because India is also one of the top country that produces those emissions, because they are marginalized people. So if those marginalized people, those people just like everyone else, was given the resources to actually do what they need to do to survive, they would. India's government understands the predicament that they're in, which is why they fight in the UN repeatedly for global climate change. Now, they're not seeing the change that they need, but they're going to be one of the first countries to feel it. And no one in these our privileged countries are going to bat an eye, because if they did, they would be making the changes necessary to support that entire country of millions of people to reduce their carbon emissions and give them the resources they need to sustain their culture, their livelihood, their people through climate chaos. So when we say adjustable to marginal lands as one of the major topics in permaculture design, it has to do with that is where the most impact is going to happen. And it's where the most people who are the most affected are. It isn't the people, the privileged people in their mansions or on their third yacht that's going to have the most impact. The marginalized people are the people who are going to take the brunt of climate change, and they have for decades. And as we continue to rise in global catastrophe, we're going to see them wiped out first. So we go there first because it's being affected right now. Also, marginalized lands have the most opportunity because a lot of times marginal lands are in these transitional places like Nala mentioned. If my neighborhood is on the edge of industrial, I'm going to actually have access to a lot of material that I wouldn't if I was in the middle of suburbia. So there are actually opportunities present in these areas that you would not find when we're looking at non-marginals lands. Okay, so we're going to go to the next one. That was a little heavy one, but we live in a heavy time, so I'm not going to shy away from this type of material. Make use of naturally inherent characteristics of animals and plants and their relationships to the natural characteristics of landscape for maximum utilization to create an environmentally safe and self-sustaining agriculture. I would say more than agriculture. I would say a self-sustaining world, right? What we're talking about is integrating ourselves into an ecosystem. Recognizing the animal traits that I have as a human species, right? I'm not shying away from my anger. I'm not shying away from my ability to run through a forest under the full moon, right? I'm not shying away from my taste buds being able to taste poison when I'm in foraging, right? And neither am I shying away from the ability of a wolf to be in a pack and keep those boundaries. I'm not shying away from creeping ivy being able to take over an entire ecosystem in a couple years. I'm accepting and seeing exactly what they are. And then I'm utilizing those very characteristics in the niches they belong. Does that make sense? This is really foundational when we really start getting to stuff in permaculture. This one alone is super impactful when we start getting into the nitty-gritty of like microclimates and climate and plants and sun and water, because we can't ignore the characteristics of things whether or not we like them. It is what it is. We can have feelings about it, but it is what it is. Okay, so the use of wild and domestic species. And then long-term sustainability. I would even add in there and regenerative, long-term sustainability and regenerative. Any questions about these statements of permaculture design?
Yeah, I have a question, just a question, logistical. Are these statements come from the original handbook?
This comes from the textbook that is the companion book to this course.
Okay.
So this came from Rosemary Marrow.
Okay. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right, so now we're getting into specifically Holmgren's 12 principles. All right, I say that because there are two principle systems in permaculture, okay? There's Holmgren's 12 principles, and then there's Bill Mollison's, I think it's 8 principles, okay? I specifically teach Holmgren's 12 principles because I find it more comprehensive. I'm more in alignment with it. Now, I do invite you to go and learn Bill Mollison's principles because those were the original principles in the PDM and Permaculture 1 and Permaculture 2. Now, Holmgren has built out an entire curriculum around these 12 principles. I have taken the class. It is amazing. And so because I feel most equipped to teach these 12 principles, I want to dive into them. So what I'm going to have you do is read a principle. We're going to go through and each read one. We're not going to speak about it. And then we're going to do a group activity. Okay. So Carol, you're number 1.
Observe and interact.
Andy 2.
Apply self-regulation and accept feedback.
Nala 3.
Work from patterns to details.
David 4. For some reason, I can mute you, but not unmute you.
Okay. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I yield.
Perfect. Carol 5.
Catch and store energy.
Andy 6.
Integrate rather than segregate.
Nala 7.
Produce no waste.
David 8.
Use edges and value the marginal.
Exactly. Carol 9.
Creatively use and respond to change.
Andy 10.
Use slow and small solutions.
Nala 11.
Use and value renewable resources and
And David 12.
Use and value diversity.
Yay! Okay. So these are the 12 principles. Let me break down for you the difference between ethics and principles, okay, before we dive into the group activity. Ethics is a foundational theory that can be applied to any society, to any ecosystem, okay? Now, right behind ethics is principles. Principles is taking this philosophy and making actionable arms with it, okay? And that can also be applied to majority of people and place. Now we go from ethics and principles to strategies. Strategies cannot be applied everywhere. It is taking these wider actions like observe and interact and actually fine-tuning it down to something more similar to a bioregion. I could take a strategy and from a principle and apply it to a bioregion. Now, just underneath strategy is technique. Technique cannot be applied anywhere to a specific microclimate and place, okay? And that stems from a strategy, which stems from a principle, which stems from an ethic. Does that make sense? So can I apply a technique to anywhere? Andy.
No, not every technique would work everywhere.
And where can I apply a technique?
I mean, it depends on the technique, but on applicable system, an appropriate system.
Exactly. Okay, what about a principle, Nala? Where can I apply a principle?
I feel like the principles can be applied more so to to like a strategy. I mean, well, or a technique.
So a principle can be applied anywhere. It's the actionable arms of ethics. And then from these principles, we make what, Carol?
Sorry, will you repeat that? Because I was writing actionable arms under principles.
So we take these principles from the ethics, right? These are the actions that we're receiving from these ethics. And then we're going to apply it to what?
No, strategies, techniques,
Strategies.
anywhere for the actionable. Okay.
Exactly. And David, where can I apply a strategy?
Strategy can be applied into, well, that'll depend the strategy, and what you're gonna apply it to. Um, but I believe it can be applied to mostly everything that is gonna be created, or
Can a strategy be applied to
Deal.
everything?
not necessarily.
Exactly. And so where in the range of everything from a microclimate to a bioregion to the entire world can I apply a strategy?
I believe in the process of I would say rebuilding. Let's say I'm gonna take an example like reforesting the rainforest. So I can use different strategies that can be applied to reforesting that forest.
Exactly.
And
And a strategy is going to be specific to wider of a lens than a technique, which is really, really specific to a strategy, which can impact maybe an entire bioregion. So technique is really getting into the nitty gritty. That's going to be like, what kind of chainsaw do I use for this specific tree? The tractor I need to be able to get up this incline, right? But a strategy is going to be, okay, I know I need to reforest. I'm going to use tractors to make key lines. And along those key lines, I'm going to plant trees, right? But the technique is going to be the type of tree I'm going to plant, how I'm going to access those key lines and things of that nature. And a principle is going to tell me that I'm creatively using and responding to change by responding to deforestation this way. And my ethic is earth care. Is that making sense?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
A strategy is wide and technique is narrow. Is there like a middle ground for principle, or is principle kind of wide as well?
Principle is even wider than strategy.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
And then foundationally, I would say everything is circled by ethic.
Okay.
So the ethic would be the circle that encompasses it all. Okay, so we got these 12 principles. We know now that we're going to take these 12 principles, and through the process of this class, we're going to start learning about the strategies and we're not really going to get into techniques. We may touch on a few, but mostly we're going to talk about how to take these actionable arms of these ethics and turn them into strategies. Okay, so
David is very keen on details. He's very focused, very attentive. He's down on the ground. He's asking the ants what they're doing. He's checking out every little aspect of his environment. He's part of the environment, and he's interacting with that that environment by shoot, what was I saying about interact? Getting involved with that and with the environment and with the details, and he's paying attention to the signs so that he harvests his shard before the squirrels do.
Awesome. Thank you, Andy.
Mhm.
All right, David, will you introduce number 2 to us? Your partner here. I have, you are muted, by the way.
There.
Yep, you're good.
Can
We
you
can
hear me
hear you.
now?
Yep.
So she is collective and
Apply self-regulation and accept feedback.
like self-regulation and uh, accept feedback. So she is um, very conscious of her consumptions and how things uh, interact with each other. Also, she's very, I would say, observative of her surroundings because sorry, she is accepting what nature can tell her, uh, following the stations, when to plant, when to harvest, when to fertilize, or when to compost. Uh, and at the same time, she also accepts feedback from her human relationships. Um, and is on point in everything.
Awesome.
That's it.
Well, David, I do have to say that you're doing a fabulous job driving while also reporting back to the group and handling Zoom on your phone. So I definitely have to give you a round of applause for the multitasks that you were exceedingly doing well at.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and mute you and have our next group, 3 and 4. Let's have 4 introduce 3.
Okay, so I met work from patterns to details, and I'm not going to do a very good job at this because
You do a great job.
so she likes to look at how things are presenting themselves and paying attention to how they go from start to finish and understanding all of the intricate parts so that there can be adjustments made in order to serve, in relation to the earth care, the people care, and the future care, and how each of those get to build upon each other in order to, work in the most efficient manner. It's about the best I could do.
Awesome. Thanks, Carol. And Nala, will you introduce number 4 to us?
Yeah, so number 4 was obtain a yield. And with this, she likes to make sure that with the energy and the time and the knowledge being put in, that there's something that is coming out of it, that we are able to produce as efficiently, I don't want to say as much as possible, and more so as efficiently as possible with the space that is given, so then we can also meet our needs and give back to community, give to the future generations in a way that will not be taking too much. So it's not obtain a yield, like take as much as we can right now, but more so what is needed to support, and in a way that leads us to be self-sufficient and functional.
Awesome. Cool. Well, it was really awesome to learn how each of you embodied it through the eyes of your partner. So, really awesome. So what I'd love to do is to dive into this next 8. That's how we're going to finish out our teaching today and our discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen again. With each of you. Hold on, I got to do a shift. Okay, so we did 1 through 4, and now we're going to do catch and store energy. Catch and store energy. Andy, I'm going to ask on you to go ahead and give us a brief synopsis of what does it mean to catch and store energy.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Hmm.
That's why I said brief.
Brief. Brief. Okay, timer, 30 seconds. Check. So catch and store energy, capturing things that can create energy like solar, wind, water, and store them so that we can use them.
Exactly. And I'm going to broaden this perspective just slightly and say that we tend to rely really heavily on human species, on technology to do this. But what I'm going to challenge you to think about as we move into this course and deeper into the material is how does actually nature do that without the complex technology that we have, and how can we utilize the way that nature stores water, that nature stores solar energy, that nature stores wind energy. How can we as a human species use that technology and the way that the nature does in our systems? Okay, number 6, integrate rather than segregate. I am going to ask Nala if you can give us a brief synopsis.
Yes. So how I see that is really, I feel like in so many areas of life, we try to work, even like if you look at health, like in our bodies, try to tackle one part, but really it's all different pieces of the whole. And so I feel like with permaculture, we're aware that we can't, you know, go and tend to the chicken coop without it affecting this, and we can't change these vegetables without it affecting that. And it goes into people care as well, because it's the same thing there. And in terms of how we need to support each other with community, and even looking at it on a small scale of like, if I'm trying to grow all of my own vegetables and you're trying to grow all your own vegetables and we're in this community, it's silly, rather than I'll grow carrots and peas and you go grow corn and this. And so I feel like it definitely plays off into many different ways.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, number 7, produce no waste. David.
Produce no waste. I would say that produce no waste will be, instead of discarding uh, cardboard, for example, we can reuse that cardboard, uh, lay it down on the ground to let it decompose, and put some compost on top of it, and on top of that, uh, plant your seeds and let that cardboard be uh, decomposed by the microorganisms, instead of sending that cardboard to the landfill and create create the waste. Or I will use something more uh, pollutant than like plastic. Instead of you just got a can of Pepsi. Instead of throwing that can away, I can open that can and use it as a pot to plant my seeds in it, or make some holes and use it as to irrigate my plants.
Exactly.
Basically reuse what you use instead of dispose what you don't use.
Exactly. And I'm going to even push that what was just said about human waste and even personal waste, and say that when we're thinking about an ecosystem and we think about waste, it doesn't really come up that often, right? Like when we are integrated rather than segregated, right? Like the principle before us, maybe as a plant, I'm photosynthesizing, and one of my wastes is actually oxygen. I don't want oxygen. I respirate oxygen to get rid of it, because it's actually CO2 is how I am able to photosynthesize and create glucose. But in my ecosystem, it's not a waste. Do we ever say, oh man, there's just too much oxygen in this forest? I have yet to hear a scientist say that. No, because actually that waste of that plant is then consumed by other organisms in the ecosystem. So when we're integrated rather than segregated, we can utilize what is considered waste, or in other words, a byproduct from other species and other organisms or abiotic parts of our ecosystem, and reutilize it in different ways that benefit us as an individual or our ecosystem or a even wider collective. So when it's saying produce no waste, it's really about shifting that perspective. Okay, number 8, use edges and value the marginal. Carol, I'm gonna call it on you.
So, use edges and value the marginal. I would say it's interesting. I'm not really sure about use edges, like meaning to like not waste any space. Don't consider anything, whether it's big, small, whatever, on the fringe, that it is invaluable or offers no purpose or use, perhaps, and value the marginal. Again, maybe something that's not of the highest quality in the best area with the best resources, but figure out a way to adapt and recreate what has possibility instead of devaluing it and making it think that it has no possibility.
Absolutely. And I want to say, even with the edges part, think of the microvilli in our stomach, right? Our stomach lining has folds upon folds upon folds in it, because its function is to absorb as many nutrients as possible from our stomach bile, with the fluid inside of our stomach, right? It's assimilating and breaking, our food is being broken down and then passing through our stomach lining the nutrients that are needed to build and maintain a human body. So when you think about edges and it's saying use those edges, think of how our organ of our stomach is utilizing those multiple folds of our stomach, those edges. It's increasing its surface area to increase its function. So when we start to use more marginal and edges, we are actually increasing our ability and our function. Does that make sense? Okay. Number 9, creatively use and respond to change. Andy, we're back to you.
Creatively use and respond to change. So creatively using change, and responding to change. Okay. Well, change is inevitable. So I would say that anticipating the change and allowing for it, and then using it as an opportunity for strategies, principles, techniques, and ethics. And yeah, period.
I love how you said that change is inevitable, because we change every second, right? There's our body, our cells are never the same 1 second after the other. Our consciousness is never the same, which means that our collective is never the same and our environment is never the same. So I really love and appreciate number 9, because it's acknowledging what is. It's not ignoring the fact that we are changing and growing and evolving, and that our ecosystems are too. And so I really appreciate this acknowledgement, because it's not common in our society to say that things are going to change, that humans are going to change, that our ecosystem is going to change, and we must stay on that trajectory, right? And so when we say creatively use and respond to change, it's inviting that acceptance and that acknowledgement within our ecosystems, and allowing us to actually be in an ecosystem which is designed to absorb change and minimize its effects. Does that make sense? Okay, so now we're gonna do number 10. Wow, we're like rocking and rolling right now. Nala.
So use small or slow and small solutions. I like this one because I don't apply that too much in my life and I need to. So it's a good reminder. I feel, if because everything is so interconnected with permaculture, if you drastically shift something over here, it's going to, really influence everything. So starting doing things small and observing the ripple effect it has in every area is really important. I think so you don't disturb too much too fast.
And when we don't use small and slow solutions, I mean, we see the effects of this all the time in our current society, just repeatedly over and over and over again. And typically what happens when what really needs a slow and small solution, but a fast and big solution is put into place, is that it creates massive destruction, whether environmentally, whether socially, whether economically. I mean, we can see this even in recent events to things that have occurred in the past few years. There were solutions that would, this is how it's going to be, and it's going to be immediately applied. And it had some really dramatic effects in our society that we are still dealing with today. And so I really, again, I appreciate all the principles, and there are some I appreciate more than others. And I think this really feeds into that last one, because we say use slow and small solutions because we know that change is inevitable. And we know that interconnectedness exists. Does that make sense? That was a pretty big statement I just made. Okay, so David, you are next. Use, right? I'm on the right one? Yeah, David, sorry. David, you are use and value renewable resources and services.
Use and value renewable resources
and services.
and services. Do have to value renewable like solar, like wind power, water power, or hydropower, because we have to grow apart from the consumption of fossil fuels. Society, the modern society, is killing our planet. By harvesting oil, like you said earlier. Society thinks that oil is endless or whatever. So we need to value, how we can harvest that energy, how to collect that energy and reapply it into our daily life.
Absolutely.
And I think that's it.
A really great way I like to think about this too is when I really start getting into this particular principle is how many times can I reuse water, right? Like how many times water is entering my site or water is entering my home or wherever that point of origin is, right? And I like to just think, okay, this is a renewable resource, right? Water is renewable at this moment in our timeline. How many times can I reuse that water, right? Because I value it and I'm going to use it appropriately. The same thing is for wind. How many times can I utilize wind at its point of origin on this site or this home or wherever I am? How many times can I reuse this emotion? How many times can I reuse this inspiration? How many times can I reuse this book? Right? So we're applying this and thinking about it in a broader way at times too. Okay, last one, Carol. Use and value diversity.
Well, to use and value diversity is to broaden our horizons on so many different levels, because we're looking at not only the diversity of ecosystems, but of communities, of resources, of people, of nations. And so we can learn so much from valuing and using, rather than getting caught up in our single-mindedness, monoculture based, privilege based, selective hearing, listening space, but use and value diversity because it has a tremendous amount of knowledge and wisdom for centuries.
Yes, I can't even add anything to that. Thank you. Okay, so the 12 principles. Now I'm going to challenge you right now, okay? Because these 12 principles may not be applicable to our individual lives or to those around us immediately, okay? So how I'm going to challenge you is with a compassionate and transitional space. Okay, so yes, we have these 12 principles. Yes, these are the action arms. Boo, 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 boo. I'm going to go make it happen. I'm going to take these ethics. I'm going to make it into reality, start creating these strategies. But the container of which I hold that in is in this compassionate and transitional space. Okay, this feeds directly back into every single principle that we just talked about: slow and small solutions, responding to change creatively. Okay, so we're honoring the space between the first learning about permaculture and then actually that living in that regenerative way over time. Okay, because I may in a moment live in that designed permaculture life, right? And then I have to respond to change, and I may no longer. I may get a job back into a 9 to 5 to get out of a financial burden that occurred. Okay, I may have to eat food because of the circumstance that I'm in that's no longer regenerative or clean. Okay, this is a reality for many, many, many people on this world. Okay, at times we can be in a permaculture design life, but it isn't always a privilege for everyone to can maintain that. So we're having that realistic view on where we are and where others are and the steps that it takes to get there, and how much effort in this capitalistic society that we are still straddling while creating that new reality, right? Of how difficult it can be to live fully in that new realistic reality. And being compassionate with those around us and their struggles, their oppressions, and their pace. Okay, because not everyone is able to break the programming as fast or as quickly or as compassionately or as gently even as you. And it could create more trauma, and that it could even have a ripple effect and regress people even further back. So be compassionate with yourself. Be compassionate with others about where you are as you do this spiral. Okay, this picture is a spiral of building, land and nature stewardship, tenure and community governance, finances and economics, health and spiritual well-being, education and culture, tools and technology, with the principles in the middle of the spiral grounding that. Okay, it's an ever learning process. We're coming back to similar lessons again and again as we navigate that spiral with the principles as our core. Any questions, comments, or anything people would like to add? Go ahead, Andy.
Did you draw that?
I didn't. That's from David Algren.
Oh, it's really awesome.
I agree.
Especially with the principles in the middle. Yeah.
And the ethics, you
What-
see the ethics in there too?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, it's really awesome. That's
To our closing. So another one to kind of give you that.
What? Your back seat pulled down? Yeah. Take a 6-foot ladder, fix the trunk all at your feet.
So I want to go ahead and read this quote for you at the top. It says, "You can waken people only by dreaming their dreams more clearly than they can dream them themselves." And this is a really beautiful depiction of really the power of what one single principle. This is one single principle that this art, they have done it for multiple, all 12 principles. They have created this cycle. One of my favorite is hope composted, uncertainty valued, anxiety declines, mycelial networks
I
understood.
saw that one. I love that one of all the shroomies. What is this one?
I need to look it up, but this is a artist. I believe her name is Braille.
No, what's the principle? I'm not putting it together.
Is it on there?
I don't see it.
Oh, I'll have to look it up.
Kind of looks like it's I mean, with the wind and the compost on there, kind of looks like it's nope. Use and value renewable resources, maybe?
Habitat restored. That makes sense. Free rain cycles. Hope composted. Yeah, that really aligns.
That's cool. I could get lost in this.
She has a calendar. She does it. She does like new depictions every year and you could have like a new one every month. I'll have to dig up her name. I think it's Brennan. She's a permaculture artist. And you can find her on her website. I'll have to dig it up and I'll make a note.
Yeah, I found, I don't know what you call this, a pictograph or something, but I found